Right guys, welcome back to an episode of Jives Fishing. So we are today fishing along East Coast Park, and it's one of the few sessions where we are going to pull an overnight trip because that's the only opening that we have to fish for this week. So time now is about 11. Actually, okay, it's almost 12 o'clock. So we'll be fishing rising tide all the way to about 6 or 8 a.m. We'll see how things go. If there's any fish or anything, maybe we will back up earlier. And anyway, we'll give you guys some updates this trip, and hopefully some tips and tricks about looking at the tide and deciding on the place to fish. So stay tuned and we'll get fishing, update you guys again later.
Don't have Yeah, small one Drop Never mind cast again.
Still there
Kim Angzo. Nice.
Okay.
It's not bad Angzo. It's a nice fingermark snapper.
Alright guys, so this is John snapper, Lucianus Johnny. I think about 800 grams. I don't think there's 1 kg to this. Actually, it's a bit small, but it was very deeply gut hooked. First catch of the day, and I didn't manage to do a good job in getting the hook out. So probably we'll just bring it home to eat. And I ended up cutting the hook. So these guys, Lucianus Johnny, they tend to grow quite slowly, I think, even though they are kind of common in Singapore, and they can get quite big in deeper waters. So you see in other countries they have like maybe 8 to 10 kg specimens, which is quite huge, but in Singapore typically you don't see them grow that big. So anyway, I guess we'll just don't waste the fish, bring it home to eat, and hopefully we get other stuff on our rods other than this first catch of the night. So we'll update you guys again later.
But we see the black spot disappeared.
Disappeared. Alright guys, so I think quite a common question that we get is that what is the best tide to fish? Right, and I'm pretty sure a lot of you all have been wondering, like, do we have a preferred like maybe rising tide or lowering tide, or preferred set of weather conditions that we want to fish? So I think in this video we'll try to answer some of those questions. I'll try to split it up into 2 parts. So the first part is about the tide itself. So when is the low tide, what is the low tide, and when is the high tide, and what is the high tide, right? How that influences our decision on where to fish. And the second part, I will talk about the difference between the low tide and the high tide. So we call that the tidal coefficient. So basically whether it's a big tide or it's a small tide. So basically what you need to kind of know about tides, and I'm pretty sure a lot of you already know, but just for the beginners or people who might be trying to get into fishing, is basically tides are affected by the moon, right? So it's based off moon phases. So I'll show you how to check tides afterwards, but just in case you have no access to internet, or you are somewhere where you can't get access to a tide table, you cannot check the tide, you can always just look at the moon, right? So if it's a full moon or a no moon, right, usually you will get huge tides, right? If it's a half moon, then usually you will get smaller tides. Yeah, so the full moon we call it spring tides. Yeah, oh no, a plane is coming, so it's going to be a bit noisy, but I'll try to talk a bit louder. Yeah, so basically tides are influenced by moon phases. So typically Singapore has about 2 high tides and 2 low tide every day. Yeah, so it's not the same for all places. So if you're going overseas to fish and all that, it's a bit different. Yeah, and tides are also different from waves, right? So, and certain websites, they will tell you, oh, the swell is how big, or the waves are how big. That is not talking about the tide. That's just waves, right? Waves are created by wind. So wind blowing over expanse of land, we call fetch. Yeah, so anyway, that is about low tides and high tides. Singapore usually has one lower tide and one slightly less low tide between the 2 low tides that we have every day, right? Same for the high tide, we have one very high and one not so high, right, but still high. Yeah, so that's basically the pattern that typically we get in Singapore, right? Some days are different. Some days you only have 3 tides, right? Some days most days you have 4. Yeah, and the interval between each low tide to a high tide and a high tide back to a low tide is usually about 6 hours. Sometimes you get longer, about 8 hours. Yeah, but usually it's 6. Yeah, most of the time. Right, so I will show you guys a tide table and how you guys kind of navigate or find your way around the tide tables. Yep. Alright guys, so I have a laptop with me. Okay, but you can do this on your phone also. I just happen to have a laptop with me because I was doing my work lah. So yeah, and I just googled tide table Singapore. So there are 2 websites that I usually look at. The first one is NEA. Yeah, so the tide timings Singapore here. Oh no, it's a bit blurred. Oops, there. And the next one actually is tides for fishing. So you see tides and Soluna charts Singapore. Right, so I'll show you guys the NEA website first, which is here. Yep, so for NEA, basically you can see 2 months on top, October and November. So right now we are in October. You can go to November if you want. Yeah, and basically what it shows you is quite basic information. So the height, so 0 point something is usually your low tide, 2 point something is usually a high tide, and you see the next low tide is actually 1 point something, so it's the slightly less low tide. Yeah, and on the right column you can see H/L, that is basically low or high lah. Yeah, and then there's the timing. Yeah, so that's all you can get from the NEA website, which is helpful enough and easy enough to understand. Yep, and then you have the tides for fishing. So you typically see a graph something like this, right? You can see the sunrise and sunset, and then they kind of graph it out for you, the low tides in red and the high tides in blue, right? But you also have other information. So you can see here there's this thing, fish activity. So I think most of us will be quite interested in that, but I don't know how this thing is calculated, or how they know, like, oh, when is 1 fish, when is 2 fish, when is 3 fish. I have no idea, and it's up to you to find out whether or not it's true lah, whether you believe or not. That's up to you. Yeah, and there are other yeah, so here is your tidal coefficient. Yeah, it's a low value, means the difference between the high tide and the low tide is low. Yeah, and there is also a part that talks about swell. Yeah, here, okay, see wave height and wave direction, right? So the wave, this is the graph for wave height and wave direction. So if you're on a boat or you are intending to go on a boat, this might be more useful for you. Yeah, but also do note that this is not exactly the same pattern as you see in the tides. Yeah, because waves are not they are not the same as tides. Yeah, so just keep that in mind. Yep, so anyway, these are the 2 websites usually used. Yeah, and I will explain more about how we choose our spot based on the high tide and the low tide later. Right, so now it's time to answer the question, how does the tide influence where we fish? Right, so if you ask me, now let's say for example it's high tide, okay, where got fish, right? Honestly, the simple answer is I don't know, right? I wouldn't know, I'm not a fish. right? But how does the tide influence where we choose to fish? So that's a different thing, right? Usually when we select our location is by necessity, not whether or not there's fish, right? So if we go along, let's say breakwaters, or for example some of the small jetties along East Coast, like your Duck Jetty or your Siglap Canal, during low tide actually, especially the super low tides, let's say with 0.1 or like negative tides, you will realize that a lot of the breakers, especially the breakers after number 19, so 19, 20, whatever onwards, they have this rock piling. So it's not just the breaker goes down and then they have this rock piles below the breaker, which is about maybe 2 meters, 3 meters out. Yeah, and this can be quite troublesome at low tide, because when you are trying to bring in your line, especially if you're not using surf rod or long rod, even with long rod, it tends to get stuck amongst the rock pilings at the bottom of the breaker. Yeah, so we don't like to fish at these kind of places when we have very low tides. Yeah, and during this kind of tides, usually we'll try to go maybe like Bedok Jetty, or we try to go to a beach, because on the beach you are not limited by how low the tide is, right? You can just walk out and cast your rod and then walk back. Yeah, so that's fine. Yeah, so the same thing for the high tide, right? So if let's say a certain patch of beach along East Coast, maybe some of them they have trees behind, they're big trees, and when the tide goes up too high, you actually don't have space to cast your rod. Yeah, so you are limited by the space you have to swing your rod behind you. Yeah, and we also don't like to go to those kind of places when the tide is high. Yeah, and another thing to note is that even places like Marina Barrage or Marina South Pier, okay, actually more for Marina Barrage, when the tide is high, it actually goes over the breakwater. Yeah, so the sandy / grassy area that you see on top of the breakwater, it actually gets flooded. Yeah, which is not too good if you're intending to put your rod stand and your rods over there. Yeah, so these are things that we are aware of, and these are things that decide where we choose our spot. Yeah, so it's actually by necessity. We don't say like, oh, okay, if now it's low tide, then this certain location definitely will catch fish. I think there's no such thing. I mean, for us, there's no such thing. It hasn't happened before. We haven't had a trend like that. Yeah, so that is how we see, okay, maybe at, let's say 9 PM, it's going to be a super low tide. Do I want to be fishing at this area when the tide is super low? Right? Can I fish effectively at this area given the setup that I'm using? Yeah. So that's the consideration that we usually have when looking at the tide table and when deciding where to fish. Yep. So hope that helps. Right? We'll keep fishing. So far, actually nothing much else for us. Yeah, there's been a couple of small taps, but we'll update you guys again later. Got it? Okay. On to our second fish. Okay, I was doing my work anyway. Yeah, laptop. Okay. Let's hope this is a nice fish. Okay, anyway, the time now is about 2+ in the morning. Yep, and finally I think the water has started to move. The tide should be rising, I think. Yeah, so the fish, we're starting to get some response. We haven't really touched our bait much, honestly. He really groupers, yeah. Hello, hello. There's a grouper. Orange spotted grouper. Orange spotted grouper. You can see the spots go the full length of the tail. So there's another species called the dusky tail grouper. So the spots only go to half of the tail. Yeah. So this is Epinephrus chorioides, orange spotted grouper. Very small. I think barely 800 grams. Yeah. And fortunately not hooked too deep. Yeah. So we'll just let it go.
Alright, Alright guys, so looking at the breakwater now, are y'all able to spot anything interesting? I give you 5 seconds to see if y'all can see anything interesting. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, I zoom in just in case y'all missed it out. So yeah, there's a little snake at the bottom of the breakwater. I believe it's a dog-faced water snake. For those snake lovers or herpetologists out there, feel free to correct me. Yeah, it's quite a small one. Yeah, very cute.
Right guys, so let's talk about the second part of the tides, which is the tidal difference, or as just now what you all saw on my laptop, the tidal coefficient. Right, so certain tides you will get a very big tidal coefficient or very large tidal difference. Right, in certain tides you get very small ones. Right, so what this affects in terms of environmental conditions when you're fishing is basically the current. So where the current goes and how fast it moves. Right, so a very big difference in tide typically means that the current moves very fast. Right, so if you have, let's say, a 6-hour interval between your low tide and your high tide, right, we call this the rule of 12s. Right, so within the first hour, 1/12, 2/12, okay, something like that lah. Basically 2/12 or 1/12 of the water will move. Right, within the next 2 hours, another 2 to 3/12 of the water will move, and that goes in a pyramid shape lah. Right, so most of the water will move in the middle at the 3rd to 4th hour. Yeah, which is where the current will be the strongest. Yeah, I hope I explained that properly. Yeah, okay, anyway, so what happens when there's very strong current is that if let's say I'm trying to use a smaller setup, a lighter setup with, let's say, live prawn or maybe live small fish, and my sinker is maybe size 4, right, when I cast that out into, let's say, the very end of it, let's say the T, right, the very end, the current tends to be so fast that my sinker cannot even touch the bottom, so it just gets swept along and it's very hard for me to fish. Right, especially if there are other anglers beside me, right, and they are using maybe heavier setups, heavier sinkers, it's highly possible that my line will go into their line. Yeah, because it's being swept by a current. Right, so typically I want to avoid going to that T-shaped part. I want to fish further back along the main arm of the jetty. Yeah, so actually that's very important, because if your sinker doesn't touch the bottom, your fishing will be very difficult. Right? It's very hard for you to see the fish eat. It's very hard for the fish to even eat your bait in the first place, right? Because you have a bottom set up, but it's not hitting the bottom. Yeah, so that's actually one of quite an important consideration as to where we go when we want to fish. So if we know that the current is going to be very strong and we don't want to use a heavy sinker, then we will avoid these places. Yeah, so that is also one of the main considerations that we have when going to fish, right? But if we are using, let's say, a surf setup with a heavy sinker, and we know that some of the sinkers have metal legs to anchor into the sand, yeah, so we know that it can withstand the current, yeah, and then we'll be okay fishing, let's say, at the end of Bedok Jetty, yeah, because we know that, okay, my sinker can anchor into the sand, yeah, and strong current is not so much an issue for me lah. Right, but even then, actually, sometimes we find that our sinker gets swept along, yeah, which is a bit irritating when we fish. Yep, so hope that helps, right? Those are the main considerations that we have, right, regarding tides and fishing, right? So to just sum up, the simplest answer I can give you as to what is the best time to fish is when you're free. So just fish whenever you're free, yeah, because you might not have a lot of free time. Oh, finally you are getting a bite. You might not have a lot of free time next time, like in the future, like next week or next year, who knows, right? So just fish whenever you are free.
Alright guys, it's 6:30 AM in the morning. Yeah, so I hope you enjoyed that quick time lapse that I filmed earlier on. So the sky was really red, you know, and yeah, the whole sky was red and then the clouds all very nice. Yeah, so we were actually hoping we can get like, you know, a mangrove jack to take a photo with that nice sky. Yeah, but that was just a joke. Yeah, so for the night, we've been here since 12 plus, and we've only got one angzor and a grouper lah. So I think the tide moved very slowly. It was the high tide is about 8 and it's 2.0, so the tide moved very slowly and we didn't get much bites actually. No drag pull or no, don't even have the rod, you know, little bend and stuff like that. Yeah, even our small rod that we put 2.0 hook and small sotong didn't really have any, you know, the bell didn't ring and stuff. So yeah lah, now it's daybreak. We'll probably just try for a few more casts and see if we get lucky. Yeah, so update you guys again. Long drop Alright guys, so yeah, that was that was a malong, and that eel had been there for quite a while. We were watching the rod tip just, you know, wiggle for very long. Yeah, so that was kind of the only bite in the morning. Now that was our last cast lah, so now we're going to pack up. Yeah, so I hope you guys found the information made by my friend regarding the tides useful, and I hope that, you know, is yeah, it help you, you know, when you're fishing. And yeah, do let us know also what, you know, tips, what other tips we can share about in future videos, or what content you guys want to see, or any spots that you guys would like us to try. Yeah, so but anyway, thanks for watching and see you guys in the next episode.